let's take a little bit of a break from yelling about the state of the games industry to talk about some good stuff. Recently, I beat Persona 3 for the first time. See, I've seen highlight playthroughs of Persona 3 Fez, but I've never actually beaten Persona 3 for myself. But with the ports of Persona 3 Portable, I decided, well, let's do it. I've already beaten Persona 4 and Persona 5 multiple times. Let's sit down. I think I've beaten Persona 4 multiple times. I think I've started second playthroughs, I just never finished them. I need to fix that. But that's besides the point. I beat Persona 3 Portable, and with the imminent release of Persona 3 Reload, I figured, why not? It's a good time now to sit down and to just talk about my thoughts about Persona 3 as the whole, and why I'm looking forward to Reload so much. In a more, finalized form. I've given my thoughts periodically as I've played Persona 3 Portable, and, what I want to see in Reload, and most of that is actually what we are seeing in Reload. There's many reasons I'm optimistic for Reload, and let's just talk about that right now. I think Persona 3 Portable is a great game by itself. In a vacuum, it is a great value proposition, it's a lot of fun, a bunch of content to do, you can technically get 2 playthroughs out of it, going for each protagonist, with different social links. I like that, that's really cool, and an aspect to Persona that I think has been kind of lost to time, and that I would like to see return in some form or fashion. I tend to prefer to play as male main characters, but for people that prefer to play as female MCs and get that experience, I think that should be provided. So, Persona 3 Portable, what's the deal with it? I think the story for Persona 3 on the whole is really engaging, enticing, and I believe the themes are extremely sound, resonant, and, well, important. The game talks about death a lot, but not just death in the abstract, how we face death as humans, memento mori and all that. It is inevitable, it is inescapable. Death will come one way or the other. We can only really put it off, and life is all about trying to find meaning for ourselves before death arrives, because everyone's road that we walk may be different, but the end point is the same. Every road leads to the Reaper. And not the guy I farmed in Persona 3's, Tartarus to get to, Monad, just for XP so I can unlock Messiah. Not that one. Death itself. And that is an extremely strong theme that contrasts really nicely against P4 and P5, as those tend to be the more popular Persona games. And when we look at Persona as 3, 4, and 5, 3 is easily the most unique in this aspect. It's far darker on the average than the other games because it deals with this extremely dark and macabre theme. Death almost finds its way in, saddles up and just cuddles yourself. Yeah? Drapes over you like a warm blanket on a cold winter's day, into every little aspect and storyline of this game in mostly some shape or form or fashion. Very few social links, if any, don't deal with death and its consequences or the fear of death in some form, whether that be actual character death or the death of a skill or dream or whatever. Almost every social link deals with this idea and how the characters, alongside Makoto, overcomes them. It's really upfront and in your face, and I think that's one of Persona 3's greatest strengths. Because there's also a lot of, good stuff that contrasts it. The journey itself is amazing, it's fun, it's action-packed, it's emotional and provocative, kind of like life. Now, I think Persona 3 is not like a perfect game. It is really Persona finding its identity, and trying to spread its wings and move away from simply being a Shin Megami Tensei spin-off. Persona 3 is when the game really started to incorporate, at least to my knowledge, social links, and that entire aspect and pillar of the game and series that we've all come to know and love. But being the first iteration of social links, it's, well, not the best, but you can see the effort there, and I think the effort is good on the whole. I think some social links are just way better than others, but I also think that those more subpar social links are just kind of whatever. I can just put my head down and get through it, or focus in on the social links that I truly do care about. The pacing is here and there, some of the characters are more interesting than others, but I also think the strongest social link / confidant is found in P3, with Akinari, the Sun Arcana. And that social link resonates the strongest in regards to the theme of death, as essentially you build a rapport and a relationship with a character who has a genetic disease that knows he's going to die soon, as you essentially aid him on his final quest of life. In regards to being resonant with the overall theme of a Persona game, I don't think there's another social link that is as good as Akinari, as the Sun Arcana. It is brilliantly written, paced, and executed in my opinion, And even for the flaws of Portable, which I'll get into in a second, I think that Sun Arcana is so precious and integral to the Persona 3 experience that honestly, I think it's the best part of this game. And that's not a knock on the rest of the game or the overall narrative and story and main characters. That's just how good of a social link that the Sun Arcana is, in my opinion. And knowing that it's going to be voiced in Reload is going to break me. And I think the little epilogue you get for the Sun Arcana at the end of the game is one of the most emotional scenes in the entire game, in my opinion. It is such a resonant social link that it's even referenced in P4. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know, but I dare not spoil what the reference is in P4. It is that heartbreaking and heart-wrenching, but also touching. And that kind of summarizes P3 on the whole. It's filled with emotion from top to bottom, and all these characters trying to find themselves and accept who they are, and realizing that death is inevitable. You can't escape it, and you have to learn to deal with it, because that is a part of life. We don't have an eternal flame, but we can burn brightly until it goes out and fades away, to give way for other flames to burn. Some flames burn brighter than others, some burn longer, but we all have a flame nonetheless, and we can choose what to do with that flame as we will. Now, I don't think P3 Portable, especially, is a perfect game, as I said before, and a lot of the reasons that I think, or at least a lot of the critiques that I have with P3, are being addressed in Reload from the sounds of it. I think Tartarus is the worst dungeon design overall in the franchise, at least from the ones that I've played, being P3, P4, and P5. Why is that? Because I think Tartarus has a unique idea, and I like the idea of going up this seemingly infinite tower, right? That's a really cool concept. My problem is the mechanical execution of Tartarus. Being over 260 floors, and a lot of the side content, essentially the Elizabeth requests, which are these little side quests she has you go off on, are extremely grindy and repetitive, and I don't think juxtaposing them alongside Tartarus, which in itself is extremely grindy and repetitive by design to fit the theme of Tartarus, I don't think that works the best. A lot of the floors have some interesting ideas and mechanics to them, but most of the time they're either just annoying or they trivialize the entire floor, like giving you full sight or just making everything hard to navigate. I think where Tartarus shines is really in the combat, because I think Persona 3's combat is genuinely fun. I like Portable's combat. I like having 3 different styles of melee: slash, strike, and pierce. It adds depth of flavor to the combat, and adds depth of flavor and unique identity to each main character, as their basic attack does a different type of melee physical attack. I like that, it's interesting to me, and I enjoy that aspect to it. You pair that with the basic Persona strength and weakness elemental flowchart, and that's an interesting and engaging combat style for me, in my opinion. The boss fights are largely here or there, none of them are all too memorable. There's a few standouts in my opinion, but I don't think they really detract from the game itself. And I think the final boss fight in the entire game will be very polarizing. I think it's a little bit too long, but I love the idea behind it. Now, I've talked about Tartarus being one of my main weaknesses in terms of Persona 3, just in terms of dungeon mechanical design execution. The other main issue that I have with P3 is the overall pacing of the main story and the development of the characters of Cs. If you play as the male MCs, you get plenty of development for the female characters, and you get Junpei's development at some point. But it's just like, a lot of the characters in Cs get their development at one big point in the story, and then for the rest of it, they just kind of along for the ride, or crack the occasional joke, or have an occasional emotional moment. And I just feel they're a little bit too isolated. I prefer when they're more spread out, and we get that development over the course of a longer period of time. It's where I think P4 and P5 honestly learn from P3, and learn from this early attempt at social links. And says, okay, the pacing wasn't the best, let's spread it out a little bit. So in like P4, you would have a dungeon for a main character, and you would unravel their story throughout that dungeon, and throughout that like month-long period, and then you would gain access to their social link to expand and further their story and their execution, and to show us what they learned from their time in the spotlight in the main story. Alongside a bunch of other just fun events that happen throughout P4, and this also applies to P5, and I think the pacing for the characters overall overall is better in P4 and P5, but I think that also speaks to how strong of a cast of characters that P3 has, where even despite these pacing issues, I can put the cast of P3 up against either one of them and they'd be comparable. I think one of the main reasons I really like the characters of C's is because of how emotional each of their stories really are, and because of how they all lend themselves to the overall themes of the game. Like I said, death plays a massive factor, and when you know that Sword of Damocles can hang over everybody and that everybody can be affected by that, and how you see them cope and learn and just grow as characters as a result of character death, but also the concept of death, I think sometimes the brightest stars burn the brightest because of how dark the background that surrounds them is. It's one of the reasons I really like these more dark and macabre games, is because the contrast between how brutal the world can be with how well these characters can react to it is a contrast that I really do appreciate. I did not think I would like Junpei as much as I ended up liking him, but his story is that strong. Same with Akihiko, same with Mitsuru, same with Yukari, and exactly the same with Aigis. Aigis is one of my favorite characters in all of Persona, alongside Elizabeth. And most of the reasons that I really like Elizabeth come from P4 Arena, but you can see the sparks of that story really start to shine and spark in P3. And I think that does says something about how good these characters are, that I can have all these issues with the pacing and that the first half of the game is kind of really slow and not plotting, but it feels like Saturday morning cartoon syndrome, where it's like the thread of the week with the big shadow of the month or the full moon cycle. You go in, deal with them, back out, okay, let's repeat that all again next time. And I think P3's story really starts to come into its own and really shine and spread its wings when Aigis gets introduced in summer. Because when that happens, a lot of those overarching themes of death really start to introduce themselves and show just how deeply entwined and intertwined with the threads of the main narrative that it really is. And that's why I think it really starts to shine. And I think the story of the game only goes up. And I think it culminates with one of the best endings in all of Persona. And not even just that, I think the ending of base P3 is one of the best endings ever written for video games. I rank it extremely highly, even in the confines of Portable where you don't have those cutscenes. I know the Fez versions, and I rank that ending extremely highly. I hate the answer, and that was my immediate reaction after playing Portable, is just realizing how much I actually despise the answer, and how it kind of undercuts how good of an ending P3 really had. But again, how does this relate to Reload? Well, they're adding more events for the characters of C's, and they're adding more stuff to do in that first little chunk of the game for the main characters of C's. That's exactly what I was missing out on. Having those events to really show the interpersonal relationships and dynamics between the characters of C's, give us those kind of more wacky and goofy moments with C's outside of just the full moon dark hour moments. We get a few of them in P3, but not as much as we get in, say, P4, P5, and I think that really helps to expand the cast of characters and makes them come all of their own, because we see how they interact not just with Makoto, but each other on a more consistent and frequent basis. And that's one of the main reasons I'm looking forward to Reload so much. A redesigned Tartarus to hopefully spice things up and learn from mementos of P5 and P5 Royal, but also to coincide with that, more of these character moments and supplementary storylines with the main characters of C's in this first half, where most of the social links you're gonna end up doing are just for these supplementary side character social links just to fill out the Arcana chart. Or deck, I guess. Which are cool, and there's some stars there. I love the old couple, I love Akinari, as I said before, but characters like Kenji, I just never cared about. And you don't get most of the social links for the actual characters of C's in Portable until way late in the game, because the main story locked, for the most part, as they normally are, but just really late into the time, really late into the game. Give us more of those hangout sessions earlier on in the game to develop that repertoire to make us care about these characters earlier on, and not just rely on pre-existing knowledge of P3, and I think that is for the best in my opinion. I'm super excited to see what these new scenes offer and bring to the table. I think Reload lets us choose the abilities we inherit for Personas when we fuse Personas, thank Christ, because the idea of it being randomly generated in Portable and just select random abilities from the 2 or 3 or whatever Personas you're fusing is really annoying and just ends up with you just constantly refreshing it to make sure you get the ones you actually want and need. But yeah, overall, I'm really positive and optimistic about P3 Reload. Obviously, we have to wait and see how they exactly execute on everything, and how certain scenes stack up to the original, and it's going to be hard to readjust to an entire new cast of VA. Sorry, hiccups. For the most part, but I'm willing to give them a bash, and to give them a chance to really shine all of their own. But honestly, some of these characters in P3 are, I think they're some of my favorite characters in not just all of Persona, but all of gaming. Namely, Aigis. Her storyline is extremely well handled and well done in my opinion. It's backloaded to be sure at the end of the game, but my god is it good. There's always something about the machine learning to become human and like gaining a soul that has always been like an easy thing for me to really like grab onto. I mean hell, one of my favorite characters in all of gaming is Master Chief, for crying out loud. And my favorite game of all time is Nier Automata. So I just kind of naturally cling to the character of Aigis in a lot of ways, in terms of themes and messaging. And if I have to look to P3 and say, who's my favorite character? In terms of just P3, Aigis. In terms of also including Arena in the mix, Elizabeth. And while I think the other games, on the average, like P4 Golden and P5 Royal, they tend to be more consistently well executed in my opinion than P3 Portable, I think the highs are on average higher than the highs of the other game, but the lows are on average lower than the other games as well. I still think my favorite section in all of Persona is the third semester from P5 Royal. I hold that in extremely high regard, but I think P3 Portable is really close there with the ending of the game. Again, ignoring the answer. But yeah, I'm optimistic towards Reload. I really want to see this game now with actual cutscenes at a proper pacing, with even more scenes and more voice acting and all that goodness. Give it to me. I am ready to be emotionally broken. And with that, I think I'll call the video there for the day. Leave a comment down below with your favorite scene from P3 and your favorite character from P3. I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions and to hear why. Yeah, let's discuss a good freaking game, shall we? So thank you all for tuning in, stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye everybody, until we meet again.